In this pre-feast season, I'd like to talk a little bit about a special spiritual gift, one that is very important. It comes from each of us. It's something that we can give, and wanted to talk about that a little bit and how we might deploy that ourselves as we go forward. And I'm grateful to Mr. Kubik for bringing a little control up here so I won't be saying next slide, hopefully not. But before we do that, I wanted to make sure we're all in the right frame of mind to receive this message. So we'll go forward from here. I want to talk about, you may have heard or saw about a month ago or so, mid-August, August 19th to be specific, they discovered the USS Indianapolis. It was buried at one of the deepest parts of the Pacific Trench and away from the Philippines. And it had been lost in late July of 1945. And they had found it, and there was a lot of rejoicing because there's still some survivors. Does anybody know anything about the USS Indianapolis? A little bit. It's the worst naval accident in tragedy in American history. There were over 1,000 people on board. 300 of them were killed instantly, and 900 survived. And then they spent about 5 days in the water. So you can see here's a picture of it. It was the flagship of the Navy at the time. It was used by Admiral Spruce. It was Roosevelt's ship of state, very prominent ship in the Navy, and it was an accidental mission. It was supposed to be assigned to a different ship, but it wasn't. So you can see here some of the detail that's on here. They had two very large items that were loaded aboard, and it was considered a top secret mission. And they were on a special war footing at the time. They were docked in San Francisco Bay. One of these items was actually welded to the deck of the ship in a locked cabin and put under armed guard. And nobody had any idea what it was for. They were just told to sail at all best possible speed. Well, of course, what happened is they were delivering the first atomic weapon. There was no long-range, safe, airborne way to get it to the island of Teton, which is south of Guam, which is where they were going to stage the nuclear piece, and so they had to do it by ship. So when they got there, they didn't know what they had. They unloaded it, and so all was well, and they left. Now, because of its status, the USS Indianapolis did strange things during the war. And sometimes it would just disappear because it was Admiral Spruce's flagship, and it would get diverted. So after it left, it was supposed to go back to continue to the Philippines. It had come from San Francisco. But unfortunately, at midnight on July 30th, it ran into a serious disaster. It was sunk by two torpedoes from an unsuspecting source. There were submarine activity warnings, but they never got to the USS Indianapolis. And so shortly after midnight on July 30th, 1945, the ship, USS Indianapolis, sank. And it was a huge ship, one of the biggest. It was a battle cruiser, one of the biggest non-giant ships like the USS Missouri. But it sank. The devastation was so great, it sank in 12 minutes. So you can imagine yourselves, talks about, when we read in the Bible about Paul being shipwrecked 3 times. And he said he was in the deep for a day and a night. And all of a sudden, it's at midnight, you're not suspecting anything, you're sound asleep, and the next thing you know, you're half burned, and you're in the water, and you're struggling for your life. So it was not what you consider to be a great time. So some people have wondered, when you're driving around the city, you'll see 465 is named, the USS Indianapolis Memorial. And you wonder why, they did that. Because obviously there was some valor involved. They lived for 5 days. But to the extent of what happened to these people was pretty gruesome. And so, I don't know if anybody's read this book. It's in every single Marion County Public Library. It is it's a very difficult read. It's a fascinating, inspiring read. It's also difficult because it talks about what happened to these guys in the water for 5 days. Now, they made a movie out of it, and this movie, these photos from the movie, actually don't even come close to talking about the carnage that these poor guys went through. So they were in the water, as I mentioned, for 5 days. So what happened? Over a period of time, when they got in the water, there were 900 men alive. At the end of the 5 days, there were only 300 and some people still alive. So what was the difference? Why did those 300 people live and the other people not? Well, we'll talk about that here. As I say, 325 men survived, and a few more died immediately after being rescued. But here's what happened. They got words spoken to them sometime during their life that made an incredible difference. Now, these guys, to give you an idea without trying to go into any gruesome detail, because there is a lot of gruesome detail, the valor in which they displayed in the water, I can't imagine being in the water for a couple of hours, much less an oil slick. The first day they were in the water, USS Indianapolis carried so much oil because that was the propulsion fluid. There was 2 inches of oil in the water. So you can imagine bobbing around in here in oil. And then, so you talk about fasting. These guys basically semi-fasted for 5 days in broiling heat, hyperthermia, about everything you can imagine. So on day 2, the shark attack started. And so they would push guys over, and half of them were gone. And when the rescue mission started on day 5, they were discovered by accident because nobody knew that they were missing. A plane flew over and just happened to see them. There was a shark attack underway. So you can imagine what these people went through. So how did they live? Well, this book talks about it. There was a number of people that were incredible. When I say they heard voices, these were not supernatural, eerie, weird voices. But the men who survived talked about in their chronicles that somebody in their life, somebody at a time, a position of authority, somebody who they respected, told them that they had what it takes to survive anything. Because there's an old saying for cancer patients that you don't know how strong you are until being strong is all you have. And that's what these guys faced. So they heard the voices of their father saying, "You're Mike Snyder. You don't give up." And so when they were faced with this and they saw people dying to the left and right of them, some badly, some tragically, they heard these. So the guy who wrote this book, the thing that he was singularly impressed about was just what I just said. He said at some point in the past, the individuals behind the voices had given them a gift that nobody could take away, that they believed, that they inculcated into their minds, and they became part of who and what they were. So when he was asked about why he wrote it, and this is the book, of course, the piece was, he said that he found the potential power of a single voice. It didn't make any difference who you were, but somebody told these people that they could survive, that they could go through anything. And at that point, their lives were changed. And when it came time for this to manifest itself, they could live. So that's the gift of encouragement. That's the power that we have as the members of the spiritual assembly of God to give to one another. And encouragement, if you've read in Romans 12, is actually listed as a spiritual gift. It's something that comes from God. There are some people who are really good at it, and there are some people who like me, who have to work at it. But in Romans 12, in verse 7 and 8, and you can read it there, he's talking about we all have different gifts. Paul says somebody's gifts are prophesying. Some people are in service. Some are in teaching. And some are encouraging. And he says, if your gift is encouraged, please do it, because you may save a life. The Greek that's used for encouragement is something that we've probably all studied at one time or another, parakleto. There are various different types of it. But it means, interestingly enough, literally, in a naval sense, to come alongside. It's a variant of the word, as you'll see in a moment, of what Christ described as the paraclete. When he talked about the comforter, I will send the paraclete. And so that paraclete, that Holy Spirit of God, comes alongside of us and helps us and aids us. And that is what a word of encouragement can do. Barnabas' name was changed. Does anybody know what his name was before it was Barnabas? It's Joseph. If you look at Acts, where he's first mentioned, it talks about there was a special time then when the church was very fervent. In Acts 4, you don't have to turn there, in verse 32 through 36. Talks about a time of great unity, a time when everybody had everything in common. And he sold some property. It was a Cyprus from Greece, or Cyprus. And he came and he said, I want to be part of this. So he gave a piece of property to the apostles. And he was so well-liked, and he was such a powerful encourager that they gave him what was then considered to be a Hebrew baby name, to be the son of encouragement. But that's the name we know him as, not Joseph, which was his original name. So here's some important points. The power of encouragement is discretionary. We can withhold it. We have a chance to encourage some people, and we can miss the opportunity by not taking it. It doesn't require any special rank. It doesn't require any special training. You don't have to be an expert pro at it. There's no certification in it, although some people are much better at it than others. And I try to emulate those people. So how do you do it? How do you encourage? Well, here's a couple of quick things to take away. There is a little bit of preparation you can do. I say there's no training, but you can be in an attitude of encouragement. You can prepare your own heart to overflow, to look out for the needs and the wants and try to comfort other people. It's a spirit of giving when you encourage people. It means to listen actively when somebody's talking to you. I spend a lot of time in professional communication. I find myself sometimes waiting for the person to stop talking so I can talk. And I have to catch myself at that and not let myself do that. I have to reflect what I hear to back to people so it lets them know that I heard them. So if you use words that enliven, the words that are memorable, like the fact that we're children of God, that we are now bonded together in a way in an assembly that's so powerful that, how could you not be encouraged? So you see people who are down. You see people who need prayer. You tell them, you call them. I know people here are very giving in this congregation. So when tough times come, we all have our turn in the barrel. My question to you, my question to myself is, what are you going to do? What words are you going to speak today, tonight, tomorrow, that when somebody goes through their USS Indianapolis, they're going to remember your words. They're going to remember what you said. They're going to say, Mike Snyder told me this one time. He probably didn't know what he told me, but I've always remembered that. I have those stories of my father. I have my stories from people I've met in a church that have changed my life. So let's be a lifesaver in harm's way. Let's be giving the gift of encouragement, because I'll leave you with two quick scriptures. We don't have to turn them just because they're memory scriptures. But the first one is 1 Thessalonians 5:11, where it says that we are to encourage one another, Paul tells us, even as we see the day approaching. Again, that's in a very special time where he says, go out of your way, make an effort to help people out and to build them up. And so finally, I'll ask you about Proverbs 3, verse 27. It says, do not withhold from anyone good when it is your power to give it. So whose life are you going to save today?